But right after the break, we'll find out how forensic investigators are using some sophisticated software to piece together the identity of a dead man. And that could help them crack a cold case. That story is next on Daily Planet.
Toronto police are hoping these 3D images will help them find witnesses who can identify this man. His skeletal remains were discovered 4 years ago after an anonymous tip. Investigators don't suspect foul play, though. They think he may have been homeless, but they've been unable to determine who he is this entire time. The detailed images, complete with multiple versions of his hair, were created thanks to some software that's usually used to create animation for movies. Tell us more about it is Marc Dryer. He joins us now on Daily Planet. Hi, Marc. It's great to have you here, and these images are fantastic. They're so detailed. How much information did you have while going in?
Well, I had the skull, really, and some information from the forensic anthropologist who tells me something about the individual's age, sex, and so on. And then just some standard procedures for building up a face based on skeletal evidence that have been established through studies of forensic science.
Right. Now, how did you use that to create these images?
Well, I did it in much the same way it would be done traditionally, but I used the computer. So we had the skull and we laser scanned it to turn it into a 3D digital object. Took it into the computer, and then with my knowledge of facial anatomy, the muscles of facial expressions and so on, and also a library of information about the depth of soft tissue over the skull at different places that's been gathered over the years, we can start to look at the skull, put these tissue depth markers on, and sort of try to build up the face little by little based on the data that we have available to us.
Well, when you mentioned traditionally a little bit earlier, what was traditionally, what did you guys used to do before you came to this technique?
Well, and what is still done now is people will take the skull and put tissue depth markers physically, usually they're the ends of erasers, pencil erasers, to show how deep the tissue is at different parts of the skull. Mm-hmm. And then they would build it up with clay right onto the skull to approximate the shape of the face, the soft tissue of the face. And they would take into account the way the muscles run, where the glands are, fatty deposits, to interpolate between these different tissue depth markers. But it was all done with clay and sculpting tools.
And the advantage of using the software as opposed to clay is?
Well, I'm using Autodesk Maya, and it's just it's a package that's used for making animated movies. And but what it allows me to do when I'm working with digital objects, say for example we had a broken mandible, only half the mandible, the jawbone. To do it traditionally, you'd have to cast it, reflect it, and make a mold, and it takes some time. I can flip it in 3D and make a duplicate of it, no problem. But beyond that, what we are hoping we'll get to is being able to make different iterations of the same face with different slight changes. So I can make one face and then render out images of it with slightly different skin tones, different hair, different accoutrements for the face, glasses, and so forth. And what I'd like to look at in the future is automating the change in weight of the person, taking one skull and morphing it into different, whether this person maybe was a little skinnier than we thought or maybe a little heavier. And we can do all that. And finally, one of the other things that we're starting to look at now is how we can add facial expression. Because you can see from the image I made, it's a very neutral pose, and they're traditionally made that way. But in life, this individual may have been known as a very happy person, smiling all the time, and maybe we would want to render out an image of this person with different facial expressions to maybe jog somebody's memory who knew this person, and it might be more effective in that way. So that's the sort of stuff we're looking into, and you can't do that with a clay model. You have to make a number of different ones, but I can do it all on a single model in 3D space.
Well, it must feel really great, Marc, to actually help the police identify this person after 4 years, eh?
Well, that's our hope. I mean, ultimately, the technological stuff is great and it's fascinating and I love doing it. But, really what we're trying to do is treat this person with respect, try and give them back their identity. There was somebody sometime that cared for this person, and we just want to do something to help.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Planet today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Marc Dryer is a lecturer in biomedical communications at the University of Toronto, and he joined us from his lab there. If you have any information on the identity of this man, please do call